You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
There was something taking place there over a period of time. We do also know that they found tiger's eye amulets on the floor that had monstrous type of carvings on them that were akin to those found in maybe the Bali Islands, and those were strewn throughout the floor of the entire underground city that the Smithsonian discovered there. The doorways of each of the rooms was arched, and there was a common ceiling to most that configured in such a way that smoke would have just drifted through some sort of a common passage out of the entire area. We also know that they found different types of kitchen utensil artifacts towards the back hallway, which was said to be about 300 foot long, and I think it was 50 foot wide. And there supposedly was enough rooms in there for about 50,000 people to live in, but they hadn't fully explored the place yet. So we have yet to really kind of get an eye on what else may have been discovered. There was one room that they found that they said that when they walked into it, no amount of light that they could take in there would illuminate their surroundings, almost like they were standing in a black hole. They could not get enough light in there to see anything, but they said that it smelled of snakes, and they said it gave one the feeling of the most dense and deepest of gloom being in that room. And that sounds to me pretty scary. Can you imagine being there, George, with a flashlight when you first find this place and walking into a room like that?
No, thank you.
No, neither myself. The Hopi Indians themselves, their mythology leans back in that area, and they talk about being taken underground during a time of when the earth had encountered devastation on the surface. They were taken underground by the ant people and the snake people, and they were given refuge until the cataclysm had passed. And this may have taken more than one generation in which they lived underground. And then when they finally came up to the surface of the earth through an opening called the Sitpapuni, they emerged from the earth. This is akin to all the Mesoamerican and Central North American mythologies, which say that we were born from inside the earth and came to the surface. And again, it has a striking similarity in association when you're talking about snake people and underground and having some sort of a setup down there to where they could, even take in refugees for a certain period of time. There obviously has to be some sort of infrastructure down there. The discovery of this underground city in the Grand Canyon just led to one more piece of evidence that other mythologies of the American Indians that we take as, ho-hum and stuff that people just talked about around a fireplace really have to be looked at again because, just as much as they said they came from some vast underworld, which was apparently part of it was discovered, there may be other things like the snake people or the ant people we should also take a more scientific or more objective look at and not just simply write off as fantasies from a fringe element of society.
The Native Americans have a vivid imagination. They're creative people. What are the possibilities that they created the image of the lizard or ant people, or did you think they actually see these creatures?
I believe that these creatures are seen and experienced. And when I say experienced, because of ritual use of hallucinogens by most Native American cultures and ancient tribal cultures really from around the world, one of the predominant images that comes forth in a vision is that of a snake or a serpent. And it's usually an experience that is startling. I was in communication with Terence McKenna, and I asked Terence about saying that this report I've been studying these reports coming in from ethnologists talking about, tribal experiencers having encounters with serpents and being a prevalent image within these most sacred of their vision quests. And he told me that he encountered one time a reptilian humanoid, and he said that it was one of the most remarkable experiences of his life, but he could not give me any opinion as to the determination as to whether they came from some lost culture underground or from some another dimension, although he was open to both.
That is remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, something was on this planet.
Something
And maybe,
was on the planet.
and maybe still is.
And is, I believe, still is. And you know, Arthur C. Clarke, his first book before he wrote his first book was Childhood's End. Childhood's End was written before his other great works, and it was about a story of a reptilian humanoid species group that comes back to Earth, claiming to have been, having left here a long time ago, but associated with the dinosaurs of ancient times, and they consider this their planet, and they've come back from their voyage, and its effects on human civilization. The interesting thing to note was at the beginning of his book, I noticed that he writes his own foreword or note at the front, and it says the opinions offered in this book are not those of the author. So what else? I mean, who was giving him these ideas? And remember, he helped come up with the Rand Corporation with the idea of satellite technologies and other things like that too. So he was a leading edge artist. He was imaginative, and he was pulling in information, but we don't know that some other forces weren't at work, whether they were physical, spiritual, or interdimensional, or alien.
Are there other civilizations in other regions on this planet that talk about these kinds of people or creatures?
Oh, all over. I mean, we just have to look back at the...
And I'm talking about lizard or ant people.
Yes. The ancestors of the Aboriginals of Australia point back to the rainbow serpent and talk about the rainbow serpent having been the lizard were the first persons to come up. There's an area of the Yosemite National Park, the Miwoks of legend. The natives that were there talked about Bower Cave in Mariposa County. They called it Uten, and they said it was the center of creation of the world, and its inhabitants were home to the first people. Patal, one of the main characters of their legend, was the lizard man. He was one of the first people. And to this date, they believe that cavern is still a sacred passageway of sorts. It's now closed off by water. Some people speculate that maybe they came up from the underground and the water closed the passage and they couldn't go back underground again. This is very much like the Hopis when they said they emerged through the Sipapuni. They did it through a bamboo shoot. And they say the knots in the bamboo shoot are actually evidence of what happened was they put the bamboo shoot, they started crawling on the interior of it like a ladder to get up to the surface. And as long as one of the boys was playing his sacred flute, it would continue. But as soon as the music stopped, the stalk closed in on itself, and those little knots in the stalk of a bamboo shoot, the Hopis believe, are signs of their ancient ancestors caught from between the netherworld of underground and the surface world.
Did you find the Hopis very willing to talk about this?
I was with an associate of mine named AJ, and we had followed up on the article, and I actually went down into the Grand Canyon with him. He entered a diabetic coma one night because his insulin bottle broke during the trek, and he could not make it out of the Grand Canyon. So and this was off path. We found a cave, and I took an emergency blanket and put it over us. And he managed to survive the night, but I crawled out the next day without any water out of the canyon to go get help. We just so happened he went directly into intensive care for 3 days and had a colostomy bag, but we couldn't let that trip go. We ended up on the Hopi Indian Reservation. Even he and his state wanted to pull through on what we were doing there, and we just happened to come upon a house, and it was a magical kind of a stumbling along. We ended up on the doorstep of the traditional chief of the Hopi Indians, who was the traditional chief in as much as he was the chief of the area of the mesas, which is the oldest. It's called Old Rabai. It's the most ancient, continually lived-in dwelling in North America, and he has no electricity or anything like that. And we sat down, and we had conversations over a number of years, to which the other Indians, because he would invite me to some of their dances, the other Indians really didn't appreciate his talking to me about things because they still saw me as the Pahana, that outsider, the white guy. And when they heard that we were engaging in conversations about the snake people, there was a resentment amongst other tribesmen that I was actually talking to him about these beings because they thought it was sacred. And during this time, he actually confirmed that I was, because I had told him of the whereabouts of my suspicions of whereabouts where this cave was in the Grand Canyon that the Smithsonian had discovered, and he confirmed it. And